All right, welcome back to the Agendas podcast. I'm your host Harry here with Ben. Ben, how we doing?
Doing good, doing good.
All right, let's get into some playoff basketball talk. It's conference final season. It's borderline NBA final season with how these series have gone, which has been, to tell you the truth, pretty disappointing. On the east side of things, it was kind of expected, but I think we kind of figured this Mavs Timberwolves series would be a little bit better than it has been. And not that it's been a bad series, it's actually been a great series. The games have been close, fourth quarter moments, clutch shots, big performances, things of that nature. It's just, you know, the Mavs were able to pull out all three, and that kind of ends the series. But let's get started with the Mavericks side of things. The Mavericks are up 3-0 in the Western Conference Finals, which I think if you would have said that a month ago, even, I think people would have been shocked, probably, I mean, at least surprised. They definitely played better basketball the second half of the season. The main thing being their defense improving significantly. Obviously, Luka's great. He has been great. And Kyrie is great. But their defense is kind of what took them to the next level, especially with those trade deadline acquisitions with P.J. Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. And P.J. Washington has been quite the addition. Arguably, they're not even in the conference finals without P.J. Washington, which is an insane sentence to say out loud. But the story of this series so far is Luka Doncic has been exceptional, and Anthony Edwards has not. We'll get into that in a second when we talk about the Timberwolves side of things. But Luka Doncic has been unbelievable. And the other main takeaway I have is from this Mavs playoffs in general is their ability to close in the fourth quarter. It feels like every game is pretty close. Especially these three games have been close until the last few minutes. This last game, it was like I think it was like 3 minutes left or something, and the Timberwolves could just not buy a bucket. They went on like a 4 minute scoreless streak, and the Mavs kind of just like ran away with it, and But until then, it was close. Game two, obviously, the Timberwolves are up two, and Luka hits that step back game winner, which I want to get into that for a second. Rudy Gobert, if you're down two, right, or you're up two, if you're the Timberwolves, and you see Luka Doncic get switched onto Gobert one on one, you absolutely have to double. There's no excuses. That's terrible defense. You just can't do it. I know you're down two, so it makes it a little bit harder because if you double, you can lead to an open two. But Luka Doncic on Rudy Gobert is an automatic bucket. He went for the kill with that three. But interesting take, I kind of just thought of this right now, is because they won game one, he's able to take that 3-pointer. You know what I'm saying, Ben? It kind of takes the pressure off because they're up 1-0 on the road. Even if they lose, they still split the road games, which is the goal. So because of that, he's kind of able to have not as much pressure, and he's able to take that 3-pointer even down two. But Ben, thoughts on just that micro take of of him taking that three instead of a two in that situation?
Yeah, it's definitely a bold move to take the three. Yeah, I mean, one on one with Gobert that's egregious. I'll go to the I definitely hear what you're saying. Like that stuff factors in. I'm not trying to. I really don't. I don't want to. I don't want to take away. I'm not trying to take away from Luka here. He's. I don't think he's as good as you said he was. That's why I'm a little like. I think you overstated how good he's been. And But also, I don't want to turn this into an anti-Luka series because he's played great this series at least, not the other ones, but this one he's played great generally. Um, the other thing is, I'll go to the Nick Wright on this thing. If you take a two to tie, so let's say you're 50% from two, which is right. So you have a 50-50 shot to make the shot, and then you go to overtime where it's two good teams playing a close game. You have another 50-50 shot. So it's like a 25% chance. Where if you shoot the three to win, you're 40% on three. That's a higher percentage. So mathematically, it makes sense to take the three as well.
That's an interesting take. That is a big brain take. Yeah,
Nick
I mean
Wright. Nick Wright.
statistically it checks out for sure. Was he thinking about that? I don't know. I just felt like he was in the groove, especially because he got Gobert switched onto him. And the other main point I want to get into is people talked about this before the series. As great of a defense as the Timberwolves had, first of all, they were getting overstated. Okay, is this one of the greatest defenses of all time? No, no, it's not. It's a very good defense. It's an elite defense. It's the best defense this season. Arguably, I guess the Mavs now could say that they have that case, but the real problem is they don't have anyone to guard a Luka type player. Not that anyone has someone to guard, but when we'll talk about the next series potentially of Celtics Mavs. They have Tatum, they have Brown, they have people they could throw at Luka. That's a reasonable matchup. McDaniels is a great defender. I think he was first team all defense this year, and maybe he was second team, but I think he was first team. But he's just too small to stick on Luka. Luka can just bully him, and that's kind of how Luka plays. He kind of gets his position, and he kind of just maneuvers his body in order to get the shot that he wants. And McDaniels is just too skinny. It doesn't work. So that's the main problem. As great as the Timberwolves have, they kind of have that great perimeter defense. They have McDaniels and they have the centers, but it's not enough. It doesn't make sense against this type of team. And it kind of feels like Minnesota built their team to beat Denver, and then they beat Denver, and they're like, oh shoot, there's another series. And people kind of took it for granted that once Minnesota beat Denver, then they were just the best team in basketball. But let's go back to the Mavs side of things. PJ Washington, obviously, he's cooled down a little bit from the last series. He had a massive three in game three, a massive three. And game three, it was a massive game because at the end of the day, yeah, the Timberwolves are down 2-0, but if they go back in Dallas and win game three, it's 2-1. All of a sudden, it's a series. Who cares about home court in general? But Kyrie's been very good. I think he's been very good in this series. Overall, as a playoffs, I think it's getting a little bit overstated how good he's been because he's had a couple games in single digits. He really, like, he hasn't had that scoring outburst. Like, yes, he's affecting the game in other ways, but like, you're Kyrie Irving. Can you score 35 points a game? Like, not 35 points a game, but can you? That's what we're looking for in Kyrie Irving. Obviously, this other stuff is good and they're up 3-0, so it's good. But Ben, what are your overall takeaways from the Mavs side of things? I do agree with you, by the way, just to throw in quickly that Luka has been great in this series. Now it's going to become revisionist history where he was great the whole playoffs and he wasn't. You know, he was getting the injury excuse. Now they're up 3-0. Have you heard about the injury this series, Ben?
What injury?
Oh, exactly. That's why I downplayed the injury in the first two rounds. Go listen to the old episodes of the podcast. So go give them a listen. And you'll hear I talked about the injury. And that's why I don't care because as soon as he's playing good and they're in the finals, nobody cares about an injury. Nobody cares. Okay? So that kind of is what it is. But Ben, what's your main takeaway from the Dallas side of this series and Luka and in general? Just a big overview.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, Jaden McDaniels was second team all defense. Um,
Okay.
I'll start there. Just I don't know. I'm not going to get into specific players, but just watching eye test game one, Luka was not bothered whatsoever. He was not bothered at all. So it was going to be okay. As Luka was kind of cold for most of the beginning of the playoffs. So is he going to be hot or cold? Are the shots going to fall or not? But they had no way to bother him. You could just tell instantly watching the series. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to take. I'm not trying. I don't want to take away from Luka this series. I don't think he's been spectacular. He's been very, very good. Like he's played like a star. Um, it's going to be revision. Right? If they win the finals, it's going to be revisionist history in terms of how he played in the first two series. Especially he gets the counting stats because of his usage percentage, etc. But I don't want to downplay this series because of that. The other thing that started to happen and is going to be happening is he's now going to become a good defender. And they're going to show these random highlights of him being a good defender. And so the defense, which everyone kind of agrees is what's been the leader of this Dallas run, that's been the number one side of the ball. He's now going to become a participant in that when he's a negative. So that I'm looking forward to that. But this series he's played very, very well. And I'm excited to talk about Boston Mavs, so we'll get into that at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I slightly disagree. I think Luka, like his numbers, he hasn't had like a 45-point game, but in terms of how he's played, I would say an A, maybe an A minus. Now, it's not like Devin Booker had a playoff series in the first round. Obviously, the stakes weren't as high, where he averaged like 38 points on retarded, like insane efficiency, right? Like it's not like that, but in terms of the moment he's playing, how he's playing. Defensively, this playoffs, I don't think he's been a negative necessarily, but again, is he the reason that the Mavs have a good defense? No, that's Derek Jones Jr., that's PJ Washington. Kyrie Irving has been better than Luka defensively, I would say. But yeah, I mean, definitely stepped up on that side, but that's how it works. Once the team's defense is good, it's like, oh, Luka's good at defense now. Which there's just stats going around like field goal percentage against Luka and like the guy shooting 2 for 57. Those stats, I always hate those stats, just because like if you watch the games, like I remember like Kevin Durant against the Celtics a couple years back in the first round. We talked about this series a little bit, but like you'll show like, oh, Jason Tatum guarding Kevin Durant, and it'll show like 4 for 25, whatever it is, right? But if you're actually watching the games, you understand that there's two help defenders ready to help at every moment, right? So as soon as Kevin Durant dribbles he can't dribble because if he dribbles one to the left, there's two people on him. If he dribbles to the left or to the right, there's two people on him, right? So it's like, oh, Jason Tatum guarded him 1-on-1, but like, did he really? Right? I don't think anyone's ever been guarded by Luka, and it's like, oh shoot, Luka's on me. You know what I mean? Like that's another kind of test to see like, is he really a good defender? But yeah, I mean, he's definitely been maybe a neutral on that side. He hasn't necessarily been a massive negative, but yeah, people do show like one or two clips, and we'll talk about that with Anthony Edwards because I've seen the other way where there's been clips of him slacking on defense. That PJ Washington three, there's a clip going around Twitter. That was Anthony Edwards' fault, right? So as much as people like the steals and the flashy defense and the passing lanes, and like what's peak NBA, Ben? You'll love this. Is like after the guy makes a three, then he like gets right into his defensive stance and pretend like he always plays defense. Like it could be Kyle Kuzma. Kyle Kuzma's never played defense since middle school. Even then, he didn't play defense. And like Kyle Kuzma will hit a three and like he'll get in his defensive stance, like oh let's go. It's like get out of here, bro. You don't play defense, all right? But yeah, do you have anything else on the Mavs before we move on to the Timberwolves side of things?
No, the last thing I'll throw in is we talked about the Mavs ending games, and they've done that this series. We were kind of on that. That was why I picked them over OKC, and it didn't really show up strongly there. You know, they closed some games, but I didn't see a significant advantage in that area. The advantage I thought they were going to have over OKC, they have over the Timberwolves, and that's partly the Mavs actually doing what I thought they could do, and partially because I underestimated OKC's, you know, you know, emotional intelligence, for lack of a better term. But Minnesota has none of that emotional intelligence. Um, so that's probably been a bit the biggest factor here in terms of why it's 3-0 and not 2-1 or something like that.
Yeah, I was just to finish with one thing about Kyrie. Just he has had 30 plus points in 2 games this series. So this series he's been much more that offensive engine. But I was talking about the playoffs in general. But let's move on to the Minnesota side of things. And the Minnesota problem has been partially what we've been talking about all playoffs, where they just can't score enough points. They had at the end of the Mavs at the end of Game 3, they had a 4-minute stretch where you can't score. You can't have that. You're not winning any games like that, especially close playoff games in the conference finals. And the second biggest problem is everybody's favorite Michael Jordan next up guy, right? Who they've been having for the past 30 years, ever since Michael Jordan retired. This guy's Michael Jordan. This guy's Michael Jordan. He's not Michael Jordan, guys. Relax. It was like Michael Jordan got swept by Larry Bird. All right, so whatever. Forget the Michael Jordan comparison. But Anthony Edwards has not been good at all. Ben poked holes in this, and I called him kind of a hater, but he's maybe he's onto something with the consistency and just people like to anoint people. People like to anoint players before they actually are that level because everyone wants to be first. Everyone wants to say, "Oh, I called that. I predicted that." And Anthony Edwards, there's nothing wrong with at the age of 22 being in the conference finals, even if he got swept, right? There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is like you can't have the revisionist history of like, oh, he's only 22. What do you expect from him? You can't do that when you were the one saying like, oh, is he the best player in the world? Right? You can't have both sides of the coin, right? Again, if someone came into the season and said Anthony Edwards is going to make it to the conference finals and he's going to have some really great playoff moments and he's going to get swept in conference finals, right? No one would say, oh, that's a disappointment. That's terrible, right? But because the hype kind of builds so quickly and people want to be the first one to say he's Michael Jordan, right? I think it was First Things First, right? We talked about that show a bit with Nick Wright and I think they were saying like Chris Broussard maybe said like, I think he's more of a Dwayne Wade. Do we realize who Dwayne Wade was? But people throw that in like he's like like they have like draft prospects, Ben, and they're like best case scenario, let's say LeBron James, worst case scenario, he's Kwame Brown, and like middle scenario, like oh he's Dwayne Wade, like just throws in some like average player. Like Dwayne Wade was fantastic. Dwayne Wade's a 3-time champion, right? If LeBron James plays mediocre in the 2011 finals, the guy has 4 rings and 2 finals MVPs. He led a team to his championship without LeBron. He was great defensively. Obviously, Anthony Edwards is too. But I'm just saying, people just throw that in like that's some bum, like some average 2-time All-Star, right? Oh, he's just Dwayne Wade, right? Um, but again, yeah, they just don't have enough offense. Rudy Gobert has, people talk about him in the playoffs, like he kind of plays himself off the floor. This series, I think we've seen that more than ever, just because Luka just toys with him. Anytime Luka's on, we talked about that game winner, obviously. But every time we talk about, every time Luka sees Gobert on him, it's just free points. It just is. Um, Ben, is your like windshield wipers on?
Yeah, it's raining. It's starting to rain here.
Okay. If you need it, whatever, yeah, it's fine, whatever it is. But I can hear it a little bit. But yeah, it's fine. But yeah, Rudy Gobert. Every time Luka gets on Gobert, it's just free points. And they kind of took him out of the game and put in Kyle Anderson. who's been the best defender on Luka in the series for the Timberwolves, which is not saying much, but he's been pretty decent. And then they put in Gobert like the last 3-4 minutes of the game, which was weird. Like I don't know why they put him back in. It kind of was working without him with Kyle Anderson. But once you're relying on Kyle Anderson to guard Luka, you're kind of cooked. And we're not going to forget, okay? Karl Anthony Towns. Oh my gosh, this guy is garbage. Okay, get him off my team. No $50 million contracts for you, bro. This guy stinks. I think it was over 7 from 3 last night. Every time you need a big game from Karl Anthony Towns, he just gets worse. He doesn't stay the same. He gets worse. And then like it'll be like a random game where you're up 2-0 in the series and he'll have like 30 points and I'm like, oh, that's why Karl Anthony Towns is good. But when he's not bringing anything else to the table outside of shooting and he can't shoot in big games, like I don't know what his trade value is. But if the Timberwolves get swept, that would be the piece I look for in terms of moving on from next future. And then they need a wing defender, a big wing defender. There's more than one team in the NBA. We talked about this. The Denver Nuggets are not the only team in the NBA, right? So we understand the two bigs works against Jokic and you play them very well. But Luka's going to be here for a long time too, right? Luka's not going anywhere. OKC's not going anywhere. So you got to plan for more than just Denver. But those are my main takeaways. And again, and also just throwing one more thing, they've been outplayed in the clutch. It comes back to not being able to get buckets. No one outside of Anthony Edwards can score, and Anthony Edwards has really struggled in this series. So, when that's happening, you're just not going to be able to score enough points. But those are my main takeaways, Ben. What were your main takeaways from the Timberwolves side of things and the Anthony Edwards side of things?
Yeah. So first of all, it's raining really hard here, so I don't know if you could hear it or if you could hear me.
Yeah, it's fine. If anyone's listening, it's just raining a little bit. No problem.
Yeah.
It's all
So
good.
I mean, there's a lot there in terms of the Timberwolves. I'll start with Karl Anthony Towns just because that's where we were. Yeah, I haven't trusted this guy the whole playoffs. This is not revisionist history. You can go look at any of these things. Never trusted him. He did have a good game. In game, I think he started out game 6 really well. So got to give him some credit for that. But outside of that, it's been a joke. Did you get his quote after the game, Harry, where he said, "I've been shooting 1,500 shots a day to try to fix my shot"?
Shoot some more, bro.
He said 1,500 shots, bro. The NBA players like TNT, they're like, bro, I was in the league. I would do 300 makes. That takes me like 30 minutes. This 200 shots is like 3 hours, bro. Between walkthroughs and everything, you don't have time for that. It's cap. So, I mean, who
Well,
cares?
let's say it is. First of all, maybe that's why his arms are tired. Why are you taking 1,500 shots when the games are one day in between?
Whatever. I mean, whatever. Who cares? The fact that you're dropping a specific number like that is like an excuse. Whatever. Just here's where we'll go though. You ready for his contract, Harry?
Go for it.
24-25, 50 million. 25-26, 53 million. 26-27, 57 million. 27-28, 61 million, Harry. This guy's under contract 1, 2, 3, 4 seasons at 55 million average, bro. Good luck with that, John. Okay.
Let me ask you on that quickly. Do you view that as a negative asset in terms of like it's literally a negative? You'd have to pay someone to you'd have to give away a first round pick to get rid of him. Do you view it as it's a positive asset, but he's not really bringing that much value, or do you kind of view it as something neutral? Just out of curiosity.
Um, we're talking about 55 million. That's a max contract. That's like Jaylen Brown, like the new max. That's as max as it gets.
Let's say the
That's got to
Hawks
be a
they offer the Hawks. Let's say they offer the Hawks DeJounte Murray for Karl Anthony Towns. You're hanging
no.
up the phone.
Well, I'm hanging up the phone for a number of reasons. I mean, the Hawks specifically will never pay the tax, so I'm not spending 50 million on my no tax team on Karl Anthony Towns.
Right.
Number two, DeJounte's at like 25 million because he's on an amazing contract that no one wants to talk about. Adds to his value.
Right.
So whatever. That's a specifically bad. I think it's a negative. Any competing team, unless they're operating with unlimited budget, is unless they just don't care about the budget, like Prime Warriors or whatever. Like this is a negative contract.
On a championship team, what player is he? Because I guess on this team, he's probably the third best player. I guess Gobert's probably better just what he brings defensively. But on a championship team, what player is he on your team? Is he your fifth best player? Is he your fourth best
He's
player?
a 3B, maybe a 3A if you have a good 3B. Somewhere in the three. He's part of the 3 group. You probably have another 3 on that team as well.
Yeah, you can't be paying that guy 50 million. But anyway, that's kind of a little bit of a tangent. But yeah, what were you saying?
Okay, so that's where I'm at. We covered him. Um, to the defense, Minnesota. You were talking about the all-time defense. I think that narrative was coming from the first two games against Denver, where not only did they not let up a lot of points, they held them to little points. They were also getting ball pressure full court. The Nuggets couldn't get the ball up the court for 2 games. So I think that 2 game strample is where we're getting this narrative of all-time defense. And eye test for those 2 games, it looked like that. Since
The
then,
Suns couldn't score either. To be fair, the Suns couldn't really score either.
yeah. So that's probably where that's coming from. But it's died since then. Um, and that's like whatever. We have new information now. So like that's yeah. It was what it was. But I don't think anyone's fine. In terms of Anthony Edwards is an unusual situation to me, right? Because you were talking about anointing people too early. We did this even this year with Jokic in terms of putting him into the top, 10 all time or whatever we were doing there. Um, Usually, this is why it's unusual to me. Normally, when we anoint people too early, I think we anoint people. Usually, it's anointing people who I just don't think are good enough. Um, I'm trying to think of an example because I don't want to use Jalen Brunson because I don't want to use him because I think he might be good enough.
Halliburton.
Halliburton, great example. Where this guy, we anointed a guy who's just not good enough. In 7 seasons, when he's in his prime or 5 or whatever, he will not be good enough. He's just not. He is not. He's not that talented. You need a certain level of talent. I'm not saying he's not a hard worker. I'm not saying he couldn't date my daughter. I'm not saying I don't want him on my team. I'm saying you need certain genetics and capabilities, and there's only 4 people on the planet at a time who have it, and he just doesn't have it. So that's normally what happens. Anthony Edwards, you watch, I see the flashes, and I don't want to say flashes because I think it's more consistent than flashes. It's not like a quarter at a time, right? Or a random possession. It's like games, half games, where you see it on both sides of the court as a defender, all NBA level defender for stretches, and the way he can cover ground and guard anybody and recover. And then on offense, obviously, you can see it for stretches. It's just, I don't, I'm a little perplexed because I see in 3 years, he could be that. Like, I see the talent there. And I see it consistently enough that I don't see any reason why he can't be more consistent than he already is. But for whatever reason, for games at a time, he just disappears. I don't know why, and that's why it's a little bit weird to me. Is just, but yeah, I still see the talent there. Obviously, he's not there yet, but I see it there that it's possible he could get there.
Yeah, I'll throw in a couple of things and a couple of reasons why. First of all, he's 22, right? So that's the thing with young players; they tend to be inconsistent. So it doesn't mean he can't get there in a couple of years because he's 22, right? Um, the other thing is that archetype of player tends to be more inconsistent. Even a Kobe Bryant, who was maybe, I guess Michael Jordan's kind of that archetype of player, so maybe he's like the peak. But even a Kobe Bryant, who was probably the second best player of that archetype ever, he still tended to be inconsistent just because the type of shots you're taking. You're not like Luka's kind of taking a three or a layup, so it's just in a more efficient brand of basketball. Harden, a three or a layup. You're just more efficient, right? Curry, a three or a layup for the most part. And he's kind of that mid range, and he's more aggressive. But I think, and he may never be. He's 22, so maybe he will turn into that offensive player. That's when it gets scary. But even if he's not quite that level of consistency of a Luka Doncic offensively, I think if he can bring like first team All NBA caliber defense, right, or All NBA caliber defense, second team even, that's where he can kind of close that gap in terms of like, okay, he's not quite as offensively impactful as some of these other guys, but that defense is definitely significantly better than those guys. If you get what I'm saying.
For sure, for sure. I'm kind of rooting for it because I'd love to see it. Um, in terms of the Michael Jordan comps, obviously he's not Michael Jordan, but I do see it just like stylistically, like body mannerisms. I'm not saying he's like the it factor. I'm just saying physically the way the guy walks around, kind of his face, like I do get why you would make that, and like he shoots mid. He doesn't. He's not. He shoots mid rangers. Like I see the stylistically of why you would like say, oh, this guy reminds me of this guy. Just for just kind of as a fun thing, but
Yeah, 100%. Was there anything else? Again, just to finish this Anthony Edwards thing. It's not bashing Anthony Edwards. It's more bashing, not bashing, but like let's relax. You don't always have to be the first guy to predict like, oh, this guy's going to be this, right? It's a normal progression of teams. That last year they lost in the first round of 5 games. Then they make a conference finals run. The next year maybe they make the finals, right? That's a normal progression of teams. But because it was everything was how everything was going, and people are so short sighted, it's like is Jokic going to win 5 rings in a row? It's the same thing. It's like, relax. Let him win 2 in a row before he can win 5 in a row. And the same thing, if Luka wins the finals this year, it's going to be, is Luka winning 5 in a row, right? And I don't think we're going to do the finals on this podcast because I think they do a break in between the conference finals and the finals. So we'll do a podcast on the finals preview because I think we'll have a lot to say and that'll be enough for one episode. But we'll get into that. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we move on to the East?
Yeah, I guess the last thing I was throwing on the Timberwolves is it felt like the Nuggets was their championship, and no team is ever going to say this, but it feels like they're happy to be here. And they're like, okay, I mean, yeah, we got swept, but like we want, like they're happy to be here. They're satisfied right now. What it looks like, what it feels like. Yeah, that's my last thought.
Outside of Gobert, I mean, outside of Anthony Edwards, I'll relatively agree with you on that take. Anthony Edwards, I'm not going to disrespect him quite that much. But let's move on to the Eastern Conference. And, the series started with some promise. It was the Pacers had good control of game one. They blew it. Jaylen Brown hit the big three. Jason Tatum took over overtime. And it was like, okay, yeah, this series is over. Like, that was the game that the Pacers had to win to make it a series. And then um, game three, the Pacers were also in that game, but again, once Halliburton's out, and then I think Halliburton's out tonight also, it's just like, okay, the series is over. It's more about Boston. It's people talking about, is this the easiest playoff run ever? Arguably, it is. Although we got to look at some LeBron runs, and the LeBron runs, right? People are like, well, he faced he's faced 4 All-Stars, and then they show the Atlanta Hawks. All right, so can we stop acting like that's 4 All-Stars? I understand they physically made the All-Star team. But when you're listing Kyle Korver, DeMarre Carroll, Paul Millsap, and Al Horford, those guys are role players to bench players. You know what I'm saying? That's not 4 All-Stars, okay? So it's like, LeBron faced a 60-win team. He beat the 60-win Hawks. Shut the hell up, bro. No, you don't even believe that, okay? That's just LeBron James, stupid fans, 101. But anyhow, yeah, LeBron definitely had some easy runs, though. I will say that. Rookie Tatum, and DeMar DeRozans of the world, and the Kyle Lowrys, and the Jeff Teagues of the world, whatever it was. I mean, that might have been Jeff Teague was the 4th All-Star on that team. I don't remember, but he definitely had some weak ones. But this is historically weak. There's no question about it. And going into the playoffs, right? In terms of the East, if you were to say, we talked about this, like if someone was going to challenge Boston, who would it be? And we kind of threw out the Bucks potentially just because of Dame and Giannis, the Sixers because of Embiid, and the Knicks, right? Because they matched up well. They didn't play any of those teams. They just did it, right? So, it is what it is. Even the 2020 Lakers is another easy run. It wasn't as easy as this because they definitely faced some MVP level players at least. But I mean, the teams that they faced were already weak, and then to throw in all the injuries on top of that, it's been embarrassing. But again, I'm not blaming Boston because like, what are they supposed to do? Not win the games? Like Kevin Wildes, I think said, he's like, now we take away the Boston Celtics Eastern Conference banner because they played who they played, right? Like, no, that's not how they played, but it's just you got to take everything in context. That's all. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about in terms of Boston or the series in general? And then maybe after that we'll get into some Tatum talk.
Yeah, Boston. Well, first of all, it's raining even harder now, so I don't know if how that's going over on the other side of the audio.
Yeah, it's okay. For those of us listening, we're recording in cars because that's like where we can get quiet space. So if it's if you hear rain, that's what it is. I can hear you pretty clearly though, so you should be okay.
Oh, okay. All right, fine. So let's let it ride. In terms of Boston, right, that is a good point. They haven't played any of the 3 teams we thought would give them trouble. What I will say is I'm satisfied with what I've seen from Boston. They basically swept everybody, except the one day they shot 20%. Like from the teams they played, I've been pretty satisfied with how they performed and how handily they beat these teams. I guess game 1 against the Pacers was, I mean, that was not ideal, but I mean, they won it. But I'm satisfied with what I've seen with Boston in terms of I am somebody who does not want to see Luka Doncic win the finals. Like you said, we'll have more time to get into this. I'm very excited to talk about it. If he wins the finals, my life is going to be out of control. He's going to get the carry the franchise treatment. Trae Young's a garbage can. I mean, it's already that because the big excuse was Luka only has one conference finals and Trae has one conference finals. So this kind of blows that up in terms of just like taking away context argument. But if he wins the finals, it's going to be out of control. So I've seen enough from Boston that I think Boston's got a shot. Like not even a shot. I'll say it's 50, like I believe in Boston can beat them. So I'm happy about that. I mean, I've seen enough from Boston. I think it's going to be a competitive finals at least. Maybe even Boston's the favorite. But yeah, that's kind of most of my takeaway until we do the full dive later on. But yeah, we can hit Tatum now.
Yeah, in terms of Boston with Dallas, I think they just match up much better, and I definitely give them a shot, and I'll probably pick them. But we'll get into that. Also, maybe Porzingis will come back. That'll be a big bump if that happens. This is all without Porzingis. Well, let's talk about Tatum a little bit. Tatum does get overhated. He does get killed a little bit. Um, in terms of like people take it too far almost. It's kind of like it's like people call him a superstar, and then they bash him like to the point where it's like, oh, he's not even a role player. It's like, yeah, he's a star, right? But the question is he's not that top five guy, which is where people like bash him. But it's like there's only so many people that can be that top five guy. Like just because he's not the caliber of the best player in the world doesn't mean he's garbage. He's still a top 10 player in the world. He's probably top 7, right? He's made 3 All-NBA first teams in a row, 3 All-NBA first teams. He's very good defensively. His three's a little inconsistent, but his team constantly wins, right? He has good teams, but they win. So what do you want him to do? That finals performance kind of put a big stain on it because he really played like trash in that series, and that was a winnable series. But outside of that, he's probably a little bit overhated. But again, it's just accepting like he's not that top 5 guy, and that's okay. And even if he wins the championship this year, maybe I'll have him 5th or something. Maybe I'll put him over Shea then. But he's just not there. So again, he is overhated to an extent. But at a certain point, he's just also like not that caliber of player, and I think everyone kind of understands that.
You know what's hilarious? While you were talking about Tatum, I'm like, let's go look up the numbers. Jason Tatum's field goal percentage and points is for this series is remarkably similar to Luka Doncic's this series. I'm just saying, if we did the blind resume, no one would know. I'm just telling you right now, per game, Tatum 12 for 26, 9 for 16. Or where is this Luka? That's Tatum. Whatever. I'm not going to go read it out on the radio. Maybe we'll do a blind resume because I'm telling you these numbers look remarkably similar. But yeah, in terms of Tatum, here's what I'll say about Tatum. Tatum's seems very passive generally this playoff run. I didn't really watch a lot of Boston in the regular season, but a big problem with Boston and people's question was them is they did not know at the end of games who's the guy who's getting the rock, right? There's a lot of talent on that team, and it should really go to Tatum because he's a little better, but maybe it should go to Brown. They've played like Brown is the guy who's going to be taking charge, not Tatum. So they seem to have, and we'll see, they haven't been in a lot of high-stakes situations this playoffs because they've been playing garbage can teams. So we'll see when they get, it's going to be the finals against a very high-quality opponent, a real finals opponent, if they're going to be able to stick to that. But I think they've got a hierarchy of Jaylen Brown being the guy when they need a bucket and Tatum being more of a secondary, creator off of that where, they can kick it out to Tatum if Brown gets doubled or something like that. So I think the hierarchy is good. Tatum, he might be in the Giannis category where he's going to get you a lot of buckets, but he's not going to win you a game with shots at the end of the game. I have to think about that more before I make that really a take that I have. But yeah, obviously he's obviously not top 5, and he's obviously very, very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that Giannis thing, we saw Giannis in Game 6 of the finals, so whatever. We'll get into Giannis a different day. I
We're
don't
not
want to make
talking
this a
about Game
Giannis
6 of the
coverage.
finals where he went one-on-one with DeAndre Ayton, bro. You put DeJounte Murray one-on-one with DeAndre Ayton, he also going to have 55. Don't worry about that. With no
Okay,
help.
I don't want to make this a Giannis thing, so we'll talk about that a different day. But yeah, I think it's clear. Tatum is very good, and he's not top 5. I think the Jaylen Brown thing is just kind of Jaylen Brown seems to have that more aggressive personality, that more leadership personality, so he ends up just taking over in those moments. And they kind of work well together in the fact not necessarily where they play well together, but in terms of one's having an off game, the other kind of steps up. It usually works like that. Um, but I don't know in terms of top 5, right? You have Luka, you have Jokic, you have a lot of people would say Giannis. I don't know if you would agree or not, right? Maybe you wouldn't. Let's say Luka and Jokic for sure. outside of that, it's like Embiid, Shea. If Jason Tatum wins the finals, is there a case for him as the third best player in the world and wins Finals MVP?
Don't do this because you got to watch the games. Not every Finals MVP and Finals win is the same. Unlike some people want to say, "Oh, you won the Finals MVP. That means you're the same as the other guy." No, you could have beat. You could have 5 players who played well and you technically played the best, and you're going to act like you carried the franchise Finals MVP. You got to watch the
No,
games. You get.
it, oh, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Um, yeah, no. My point is there a world where you see it, or there's no? Is there a world where Jason Tatum could play to a certain level, and let's say soundly he outplays Luka Doncic? Is there? I'm not saying we're not holding you to this if he wins a Finals MVP and saying he's top three. I'm just saying, is it in the realm of possibilities, or he's just not talented enough to be in that top three after Jokic and Luka? Let's say.
I mean, Luka, whatever. I mean, I got right. That's the thing. You start listing off the top 5, and you're like, oh, he's definitely not top 5. And then you start listing it. You're like, oh, there's like 2.5 guys who are actually in the. Like, it shouldn't be top 5. It should be like we should just make up whatever tiers, however many people is in each tier, and do it like that.
We'll do
Um,
tiers after the season, maybe.
maybe we'll do
That's
tier,
something
but
we
I'm
can think
saying
about.
we're like, oh, top 5 is like the tier, but we're like, oh, there's actually only 2 people in the tier. So I don't know. Is Luka better than Shea? I don't know about that. Um,
Well, we talked about that. At this point, I just because of where he is, and I would say Luka's better. Probably, I don't think it's crazy to say Shea's better, but yeah, that's. I mean, it's in the realm of debate, in my opinion.
yeah, Tatum. I mean, Tatum. I don't see Tatum as being an individual on a team who's going to carry 35+% usage percentage and get you to a conference finals thing. That's not his. It's not what he's doing. That's what I'm saying in terms of the way I look at Giannis. Not to degree. This is going to get taken out of context, even by you. They're a role player in a certain way. You can't just drop them anywhere and they're just going to start. I mean, I guess Giannis, you can drop him anywhere and he's going to get to the conference finals. Whatever. I don't think you can just drop Jason Tatum anywhere and their team's just going to be conference finals caliber team.
Yeah, I to some degree I agree with you. I don't know how many players are in this caliber because Jokic just got eliminated before the conference finals, but um, yeah,
Division,
I think
whatever.
that
Yeah.
I think the thing that's interesting is usually that's the thing that takes the players to the next level. We talked about this kind of with Anthony Edwards. Is like a lot of they're all great scorers. These guys, right? They're all putting up 25, 30 points. That's basics for being a top 5 player caliber, even top 10, right? Top 15. But what really separates these guys is they have another aspect that they're elite at, and with Luka, that's the playmaking. With Giannis, it's the defense. I don't want to get into Giannis, okay? We're not getting into Giannis right now. Jokic, it's the playmaking. Anthony Edwards potentially could be the defense. Now Tatum's a very good defender, right? Um, but his playmaking isn't quite there, and his defense isn't quite to that caliber. So it's like, and his scoring is not like an A+, right? It's not like a prime Durant. It's very good, but in terms of like being like that's your only thing you do to an A level. Not that he's a one-dimensional player, but it's kind of like he finishes at the rim very well. He just falls in love with his jump shot too much. But yeah, in terms of like with scoring being his only thing, I don't think his only thing that he does at an A+ level or an A level. I don't think he has anything else to really carry him. You know what I'm saying? To like that next tier. But again, if he wins a championship, if he wins Finals MVPs, we'll see how he plays. These conversations start. I think he's been inconsistent in these playoffs, but he's been fine. Um, and he definitely got scrutinized more than the average player. But again, he's 6'8". He defends. He rebounds. He plays within the flow of offense. He can get a bucket. He can shoot the three. He can finish at the rim. So he has all the tools. It's just, is he quite that next guy? And I think we agree that he's not. Do you have anything to add? I think the next podcast will probably be an NBA Finals preview, assuming that like nothing goes crazy and one of these teams blows a 3-0 lead, which I don't foresee happening, but I guess you never know. But do you have anything else to add before we close this out?
No, I'm excited for the finals preview. I'm excited to talk about what Boston can maybe do what I hope they might be able to do defensively. And you were talking about off air how Boston, even if they can't bother, Luke and Kyrie, they can win anyways because they can score that many points and they're not going to fall apart in the clutch. Um,
Well, they might.
they
The
might.
second part they might happen.
They might. Whatever. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that. That's what I'm saying with Tatum. Like I mentioned off air, like can Tatum maybe just guard Luka if he's not going to be super aggressive offensively? I don't know if that's the best. I don't really know how good his defense is to be honest. But um, whatever. I'm excited to watch the series. I'm going to be nervous because I can't have Luka Doncic win the finals, bro. It'll be out of control. Um, even the fact that he's making the finals is out of control. But
Yeah, but at the end of the day, if you don't win the finals, it's looked at. Tatum was in the finals a couple years ago. Now he's a trash can, according to people. So things change quickly. But yeah, let's get on to that in the next podcast. We'll go in depth of the finals preview, assume nothing changes. If you've made it this far, which you never know, go follow us on social media at the Agendas Pod. We're pretty much everywhere. Um, and yeah, we'll catch you guys on the next one.
sounds good.